Today, I'll just focus on how religious culture has a major impact on diplomacy in Pakistan. Now, Pakistan is the sixth most populous country. 95% of those people are Muslim, only 5% are non Muslim, made up of Christians, Hindus, Sikhs, and other religious minority groups. While Pakistan proclaims religious freedom and democratic ideals, it's pretty sad. It's not doing too well. In fact, Pakistan's low score on this freedom index, you can see, is 35. It's decreased from last year, and that is directly associated with limits on religious freedom and religious culture. I want to walk you through the religious history of Pakistan because religion has always permeated this nation. In 1940, Pakistan was part of British India, and there was a Lahore resolution to create a Muslim homeland for Muslims in India. Well, that didn't take effect until really 1947 when Pakistan gained its influence. And in March 1956, Pakistan declared itself an Islamic republic. In 1974, I'll talk about this in just a little bit, you start to see religious persecution of minority groups such as the Ahmadiyya people. And in 2018, Pakistan is finally designated as a CPC, or a country of particular concern, due to its human rights and religious freedom violations. To show you just how deep Islamic roots extend into the Pakistani government and culture, the National Assembly, an elected body, has 266 directly elected people. 256 of them have to be Muslim, and only 10 of those are non-Muslims, meaning there is a major lack of representation from religious minority groups. Under Pakistani constitutional law, every citizen shall have the right to profess, practice, or propagate his religion. Unfortunately, this looks better on paper than it does in reality. Now, if you will see, like I said, Islam permeates society, and the authoritative schools of thought in Islam are the Deoband, the Barelwi, I don't know how to say that very well, or the Wahhabi movement. These schools of thoughts really do act as the authorities for religious peoples in Pakistan, because there is no central authority, and so these schools more dictate how individuals in communities will practice and apply their Islamic traditions. If Pakistan ensures religious freedom to all of its citizens, then what is the issue? It all looks good, but in reality, the persecution of religious minorities far outweighs the government's claim or proclamation of religious freedom. Now, in Pakistan, there are Islamic extremist groups that have taken hold on various communities, and practicing true religious freedom in the country might mean negative consequences regarding how the government deals with these extremist groups. Additionally, throughout history, Pakistani authorities have long used the education system to portray Hindus and other non-Muslims negatively, and to rationalize enmity between Pakistan and India, among other ideological claims. The desecration of homes of Christians, the Ahmadi people, the religious buildings, graves, this has been a consistent act among various communities in Pakistan. The government hasn't done much to limit or control. One very specific example that is causing the United States to label Pakistan as a CPC is its treatment of the Ahmadi people. The Ahmadi people are natural Muslims who have diverted from Islamic teachings in the sense that they don't believe that Muhammad was the final prophet. Persecution has been immense since 1974, when the Ahmadi people were required to declare themselves as non-Muslims. Today, they must register on separate voter lists that categorizes them as non-Muslims. Whenever they are persecuted by other Islamic peoples. The government fails to restrict advertisements or speeches inciting anti-Ahmadi violence. And those who fall victim to blasphemy laws, which I'll discuss in one moment, are most oftentimes Ahmadi people. So they're disproportionately accused of crimes. The Ahmadi people have been denied all semblance of Islamic character, and they've been denied positions in civil service and military. They've been forced to conceal their identity. And like I said, their minarets and their graves and their homes and religious buildings have been desecrated. Blasphemy laws have become a large topic of conversation and reason why Pakistan is a CPC. Blasphemy laws have been instituted in Pakistan, and you can fall or become accused of violating a blasphemy law by using derogatory language against Muslim holy sites, personages, against Muhammad or against the Quran, or if you insult somebody of Islamic culture or tradition or religion. The law does include that blasphemy against all religions is illegal. Unfortunately, because of the religious culture in Pakistan, it is mainly just non-Muslims who are accused of violating these laws. The punishment is extreme and violates human rights. Lengthy prison sentences. Many people are sentenced to death or solitary confinement in few situations. There is no requirement that proof be given that someone has blasphemed if you've accused them, and there are no punishments for those who falsely accuse others or who perpetrate vigilante violence. So with regards to all of these issues, how does religious culture really affect and even limit effective diplomacy? Well, it's really simple. Essentially, when you establish a religious state, in this case, an Islamic state, you're essentially establishing two separate authorities that most of the time work in unity, but many times will compete for adherence of its constituents. When you have two very powerful authorities, they cannot have the same power as one another. Constituents will either lean towards religious authority or state proclamation or state authority if required to choose. In the case of Pakistan, religious culture in Islam calls for the teachings of the Prophet Muhammad, the Quran, and the Sharia law as governing authorities. Culturally and religiously, adherence to these authorities will almost always trump, adherence to religious authorities will always trump adherence to proclaim national rights and freedoms, thus justifying cultural and governmental mistreatment of minority groups who can be perceived as enemies of Islam. Simply stated, most of the time when you have a religious people are going to adhere to religious authority more often than they will to state authority. And when the entire state is religious, they will use often religious authority to justify a lack of adherence to state authority. And that is just completely culturally driven. In a nation where people will always follow their religious authority, especially government officials, it's important that government officials who are Islamic, because in Pakistan the president and prime minister must be Muslim, it's important that leaders like this go to religious minority groups, neighborhoods, communities, or to the communities of people who are persecuted, even if they're not religious, and demonstrate to the entire nation that they are willing to build bridges. They are proactively building bridges, not burning bridges to separate themselves from minority groups. Anwar ul-Haq Kakar, the caretaker prime minister, actually went to various Christian communities whose homes were burned down and desecrated and said, "We are with you. We will be the voice of the voiceless. We will enforce the law. We will find the state and society standing beside you, not only verbally, but with tangible and meaningful gestures." Now, this is great, but it is necessary that this kind of thing happens more often so that all citizens can witness their religious and government officials trying to build bridges and truly practice religious freedom. There are several things we can do to make sure that religious culture and leadership doesn't inhibit beneficial diplomacy, but supports it. One of these, remove the national interest waiver on the CPC designation. As Pakistan, or even though Pakistan has been labeled a CPC, the United States has provided a waiver so that Pakistan can avoid the detrimental effects of any sanctions imposed on nations who violate human rights. In my eyes, this is not okay, as the United States is setting more of a double standard, or at least turning a blind eye to these human and religious freedom violations. The United States should limit or prohibit financial support to countries who are labeled CPCs in order to encourage and deter these nations from violating even more human rights. Second, U.S. should demand that Pakistan release prisoners who fall victim to blasphemy laws, especially those who are religious minorities. And even more than this, should encourage Pakistan very strongly to remove these blasphemy laws, especially to remove requirements for self-identification of religion. Yes, everyone should be able to identify what religion they're part of, but should not be required by law to identify their religion, because this provides opportunities for a religious government or state to mistreat those they designate as different or diverted. And lastly, Muslim imams who are local mosque and prayer leaders in communities, and also government officials who are associated with Islam, should make consistent public appearances in non-Muslim neighborhoods and religious communities, especially after moments of heightened attacks or persecution. If local religious leaders can be utilized to promote family planning and increase health and create lasting change in communities, local religious leaders with their natural religious authority should be seen tending to and empathizing and sympathizing with religious minority groups, so that everyone can observe these bridges being built instead of burned. Thanks for tuning in.